Hey guys, this is Jay here from Fandom for All, and as always, welcome. Today is Star Wars Saturday, and it's been a big week for Star Wars. It was the week of May the 4th. And on May the 4th, we got the first episode of Star Wars Clone Wars spin-off The Bad Batch. And then yesterday, Friday, we received the second episode of Star Wars The Bad Batch. And so, in honor of that show and the wonderful creations of Dave Filoni, I am here on Star Wars Saturday to review and give my thoughts on the first two episodes of The Bad Batch. So, if you don't know about The Bad Batch, they debuted in the final season of The Clone Wars. Thank you for your input. Yes, if you don't know about The Bad Batch, they debuted in the final season of the Clone Wars. Now, I myself personally have yet to finish the final season of the Clone Wars, as apparently I'm very, very lazy. But I do love Ahsoka Tano, so I will most definitely have to finish that soon, and to finally get all the information I needed before I watched this show. I know, I'm horrible. I watched this before I watched that, but I was actually very excited for this. I've always loved the ideas of genetically different or defective clones, and this show is nothing but. So this, it was a very wonderful thing to see for me and my personal tastes when it comes to the clone era stuff. So as for episode 1, I watched that May the 4th, first thing in the morning. So I could take notes, and I have them here, so if I look down, it's because I'm clocking my notes just to make sure that I'm touching everything. But I loved the first episode. So much of the first episode brought you straight back into the time period of the prequels and of the Clone Wars, and I thought it was excellent. I loved the title card, how it opened as the Clone Wars and burned away to reveal the Bad Batch. It's a really neat imagery, because the Clone Wars at the time of the start of this show had not finished. They do finish within the first 10 minutes of the episode though. And I'm going to touch on that soon. But I think what really made my little geeky, nerdy heart explode was hearing Tom Kane as the narrator, knowing everything he's gone through this year after suffering that injury, whether it was a stroke or heart attack, I'm not sure. But, you know, Tom Kane is a very prominent voice in many of our childhoods as Star Wars nerds of my generation. And it was so good to hear him again. And I missed him in the second episode, didn't get to hear him, but of course, you know, that was a Clone Wars motif, and with the end of the Clone Wars, I guess, comes the end of the narration from Admiral Yularen. But I will say that I am so glad to have prequel animation again. The first series entitled The Clone Wars, the one by Genndy Tartakovsky and Filoni, was not my favorite. I don't think it was a lot of people's favorites. I actually rented it from Blockbuster when I was a kid and watched it, and I just didn't enjoy it. But I do love Filoni's reboot of the Clone Wars. And I'm so glad that was the successful one. The animation is great, and the voice acting is awesome. James Arnold Taylor is one of my favorite voice actors, and he's very prominent in the show, as well as Matt Lanter and Tom Kane. But yes, I do prefer the second attempt at the Clone Wars, the successful attempt, and I'm so glad we're back in that era. Rebels really took me out of that, because the animation was similar but drastically different. So I appreciate that the Bad Batch is consistent with the animation of the time period that it takes place in. The introduction to this episode was so... Not even to the episode, the introduction to the Bad Batch, to the characters, was so awesome. When the kid comes running up the hill and they're like, "Where are your reinforcements? And how many are there?" And he's like, "There's 5. And they're right behind me." And then they show up and they all do their own little thing, and it's just awesome. And if you haven't watched it yet, I would stop this video right now because I'm getting ready to get into spoiler territory, but also because you need to see the introduction to the characters. Just awesome. Awesome way to bring these characters straight, to put you right back into the mindset of, yeah, these guys are pretty bad ass. I am no stranger, and I said this in my May 4th video, I do love Revenge of the Sith. And one of my favorite characters in Revenge of the Sith is General Grievous. One of my favorite scenes is the Utapau sequence, and they reference it right here. You know, they talk about how Obi-Wan Kenobi has taken Grievous on Utapau and yada yada yada, and that's just awesome. It was nice to have that little reference because it's nice to see that that's happening as this show is happening, that the Clone Wars are going on and coming to an end. And that the stuff we've seen in live action, that we can imagine these sequences with the animation, is nice. I will say that Caleb, the little Padawan kid, I really hope he doesn't show back up, but I know he will because Crosshairs is a bitch. But I hated him. He bugged the crap out of me. Kid characters in shows like this often bug the crap out of me, with the exception of Omega. I think Omega is awesome. I love her. I love her little accent. She's precious. But then we got, once Caleb's little thing happened and his little arrogance got me, we received the most emotional, in-depth, drawn-out sequence of an execution of a Jedi at the hands of clone troopers, and it is powerful. I believe her name is something around the Baliba, or I really don't know her name, and I'm very sorry. If you would educate me in the comments below, I'd love to know her name. I really don't pay attention to secondary Jedi characters like that, which is horrible because I know that many of them are very much expanded upon in graphic novels and books. And I'm currently in the middle of the Obi-Wan book by the guy who wrote the Thrawn trilogy, and I'm loving it. And if it is anything, and if it is any indicator to what the Obi-Wan series will be like, I will be perfectly happy with that show. But, you know, Fallen Order also gave us a really in-depth, the video game Fallen Order gave us a really in-depth Order 66 sequence. But I felt this one more. The tension, the confusion from the Bad Batch from Force 99, and the confusion from Caleb, it's just really felt. I think it's felt because you're literally watching a group of non-defective clones doing what they're ordered to do, and a group of defective clones being like, what is wrong with y'all? What are y'all doing? You know, and that's what really struck me. The environments and the animation in the show. Yes, it's similar to the Clone Wars, but it is stunning. I love it. Just beautiful animation. Just thought I'd bring that up really quick because that's what I have written on my notes here. In the middle of, you know, murder and execution. Wow, that's really pretty. Then they go, you know, Crosshairs is the one member of the Bad Batch whose inhibitor chip is somewhat active. So he actually responds to 66 and tries to kill the Padawan, but Hunter lets Caleb go. And that's a big driving force for the rest of the events of this first episode. And then they go back to Kamino and the Kaminoans. And I'm a big dork for Kamino because I love all the white. And I love the big Kaminoans with their giraffe necks. And I just love the visuals of Kamino. And it was really great to go back and have the Prime Minister back. Ooh, excuse me. I have no idea where that came from, but it was coming. I'm so sorry. But yeah, I love Kamino, and seeing the Prime Minister and his assistant again, and her medical aide, Omega, who was not present in the prequels, but is present here. It was just really, really nice to see. Next, they get called into a they get called into a meeting, like a mass assembly. And of course, it is Palpatine's speech from Coruscant, from the council room, where he's, the Republic will be reorganized into the First Galactic Empire. That one, yeah. And it was nice to see an animation. I didn't need to see it, but it was, consistency-wise, it was really great. And might I say, I know I said it before, but I have missed this cast. Dee Baker and Tom Kane and all of them. I just missed it. And it's so great to hear their voices again in this show. Takes me back to my childhood. And another character, a side character that I am a massive fan of is Wilhuff Tarkin. And he shows up in this episode, and whoever the voice actor is, bravo. It sounds so much like Peter Cushing, you would think that they'd resurrected him. I think having Tarkin be an animation character is the route to go, sorely because of Rogue One and how fake he looked. I would stick with that voice actor and do his stories in animation because he really nails it. Not sure if it's the same voice actor from other properties. I would assume it's the same voice actor from Clone Wars. Next I have that I love Omega. She's so great. She's so fun. I love her. The battle simulation scene was nice, and seeing them again use their individual skills and then realizing that they were actually having real rounds fired at them was a nice touch, and I really appreciated that. I do want to say real quick that my notes for the first episode are really in depth, whereas my notes for the second episode are I just finished watching it, so they're very, they're short, but I'm going to try to drag them out and really get to the points. Now, as I have stated numerous times before, George Lucas famously made a point one time that the Empire was indeed based on the United States of America. And you can see that in so many scenes in the first and second episode. But in the first episode, where it really hits home is when the Empire deploys Clone Force 99 to take care of a group of insurgents, criminals, bad people on a planet. But we find out that they're citizens who are fighting back against the evil of the Empire. Saw Gerrera shows up, Forrest Whitaker's character from Rogue One. It's really nice to see him and younger. He shows up and, he's like, do we look like criminals to you? We're citizens, And that's the truth. They're standing up against what's wrong, but because the government or the Empire, says that fighting for your rights and your right to exist is wrong. There is no individuality under the Empire. You are assets. So you must be, you're the bad guy, when the Empire is actually the bad guy. And, it reminded me very much of the arc for Karli Morgenthau in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. She was considered a criminal, and yes, she's a terrorist, and she blew up innocent people. But our government does that all the time, right? And so it was just stupid to see our government act like she was a bad guy and not that they were also bad guys. She was a terrorist, but you could say the same thing for the American government, just like Sam Wilson said at the end. And so this very much feels the same way. Saw Gerrera feels like an extremist character like Karli Morgenthau. And that was just really nice and a really nice touch. And when they went and they got Omega and they saved her, I loved it. And I loved the whole prison cell sequence where they got Wrecker, almost called him Heavy. He looks like Heavy. You can't tell me he doesn't. But when he punches the wall, and it's just really nice, And that scene is great. And using Tech's brain and Wrecker's brawn and Hunter's perception, just all of them together was great. And then, of course, they take Crosshair because his chip is the most active, and they condition him. and he becomes an antagonist. And of course, that's very unfortunate, but it's very clever at the same time. It's very clever to have their own friend be the antagonist in some respect. And, seeing what they did to him and knowing that he's the only one with an active inhibitor chip leads me to believe that a certain someone and her clone trooper friends, who she disabled their inhibitor chips, is going to show up in this show at some point. I would really love if Ahsoka and Rex showed up in order to free Crosshair from his inhibitor chip and his brain conditioning, And I really think that's the route they're going to go. Because Filoni loves her. She's Filoni's baby. She's got to show up, So that's really all my notes on episode 1. It was a great premiere. I don't think you need prior knowledge of these characters and of the universe to watch this. It stands alone. But it would be nice for... I'm saying that as someone who hasn't seen all of their involvement in the Clone Wars. So, I need to go see that first. And then I'll have a real opinion on the matter. We're going to talk about episode 2. I'm going to go in as in-depth as I can. Like I said, my notes are scarce, but my thoughts are there. The first thing I have written down is that I just love that they are so unafraid of connecting this to the prequels. They land on that planet, wherever they were. It's like Scaramite or something like that. They land there, and the first thing you see is a Nexu. And if you're I mentioned that Geonosis and the battle at Geonosis is one of my favorite scenes in all of Star Wars. The Nexu was one of the monsters that they had to fight at the same time. And we see a Nexu very prominently in this episode. And when he showed up in the first scene, I was like, we're gonna see that man again. We're gonna see that beast again. And we did. He almost killed Omega. Because, as Sue says, children have a way of finding trouble. And that's what Omega did. But I do love all the shameless ties to the prequels. Bravo, Filoni. Bravo. Know your lore and use it. Excellent. I'm going to reiterate my point because, they find out that the Empire has taken over this planet as a post and that they're requiring chain codes and restricting travel to certain people and making you present identification in order to travel. So yes, the Empire, you could definitely say, is based on Nazi Germany, but it is very much so also based on the United States. And that just shows you a lot about what the United States has become. And what it was in 1977, And I know there will be people who disagree with me. And if you solely disagree with me because you're, freedom, America, yeah, that's not enough of a reason. You need to see the issues and see how it correlates to the stuff you love. So many people are like, this stuff shouldn't be political. Well, politics runs through everything. It affects our fiction so much. Comic books get their basis from somewhere. So why pretend that it doesn't happen? That's just my opinion. Clone Dad. Cut is best dad. I loved him. I love clones that, we see more emotion and more sympathy in them. And Cut, being a family guy, is just lovely. And he cares about his kids, and he's willing to take a third one in. He's an upstanding clone man. A strong, standing clone man. I thought he was the best part of the episode. That Cut and Sue and their kids were just so heartwarming. I loved it. And, presenting, of course, and Star Wars has always represented interracial love. But seeing it again is really nice. And seeing that that love has no boundaries, because that's the rule I live by. It has very few, age is a definite boundary, but, species in the Star Wars universe, of course, is not a boundary, and race is not a boundary, and gender is not a boundary to love at all. And that was wonderful to see it represented, especially as someone who, has an unconventional love within them. I will say that as I love Filoni, and I think Dave Filoni is a genius, but Omega's arc in this episode felt very Grogu. Go with them. You're safer with them. They can help you. Like this episode of Mandalorian. I just wish they would have done something different with her. And they do, of course, but it's the same thing with the Mandalorian. She winds up with the person she wants to be with. Baby didn't want to be with Ahsoka, so he went with Din. Omega doesn't want to be with Cut and Sue, so she goes with Hunter. Hunter is the Din Djarin of this story. And it feels kind of rehashed. And I'm like, you have currently two running Star Wars shows with a very similar basis. So I just don't know, because Din is even a defect from the Night Watch, or the Children of the Watch, He's a defect. So, it feels very much like Filoni at one point had the idea, and then they asked him to do it again. Or he just decided to do it again. I'm hoping that changes throughout the show. Fingers crossed that it changes. And then, my last few notes here are really that, the animation is similar to the Clone Wars. The style is there, but it is so much better here. It's beautiful here. It's stunning animation. And I love it. Disney really does put their all into the projects, and that makes excellent content. And, it's inspiring, because I hope to make excellent content for you guys and for everybody watching. So my final thoughts on both is I have just quickly fallen in love with these characters. And, you're immediately invested. It's so hard when you think about cloning and clone characters. It's so very hard to be invested in characters who are all the same. But when you do something like this, you can really be invested in their individual goals and stories. Echo is one of my favorite Star Wars characters now because of his story and because of how sympathetic his story is. The individuality represented here within a group of men who all come from the same genetic ancestor, it's really impressive. And I really hope to see, I can't wait to see where this goes. But, my thought in the back of my head is, Omega has the accent. So, it's very obvious she is a clone of Jango because she has that Kiwi, that Polynesian accent. But at the same time, something that's lurked in the back of my head is, what if she is the first attempt at cloning Sheev Palpatine? Then again, that would be a rehash of Force Awakens almost, and how Rey was an ancestor of Palpatine. But it would be interesting to see if, Tarkin's like, we have no interest in the cloning process or anything anymore. But then Palpatine's like, oh, but no, I want you to make clones of me so, I can live forever and you can all die. I would love to see them touch on that. So, yeah, I loved the first 2 episodes of The Bad Batch. I can't wait for next week. And when that happens, I'll be right back here on Saturday at 12:30 Central to discuss the next episode of Star Wars The Bad Batch. Thank you guys. May the Force be with you, and have a wonderful weekend. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. But please, have a wonderful weekend. Like, subscribe, comment, tell me what you need. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.